Welcome back to Forza Horizon 4, and today I've got a rear-wheel drive drag tuning tutorial. I did do an all-wheel drive drag tuning tutorial, and a lot of people in the comments section of that wanted a rear-wheel drive one, so that's what we're going to be doing now. If you haven't watched the all-wheel drive one, I will leave the link in the comments section so you can watch after this. Now, the way I'm going to split this video up, there'll be the first part will be the parts you want to equip, the second part will be the base tune I like to equip, then finally I'll be messing around with it, doing the fine tuning to try and make it as quick as possible. Obviously it won't be as quick as it can be because I'm doing this for the video live, so I'm not going to mess around with it as long as I can. Just going to show you the basics of what I'd usually do. Now, the timestamps for those different cuts in the video will be available in the comments if you already know, for instance, what parts to equip. So now I've said that, we're going to get on with the parts you actually want to equip. First of all, if you were going for times, you would equip the V8. I always like to start with the engine swaps. I mean the V10, but seeing as this is a Mustang, you want to keep the V8 in it. You don't really want a V10 Mustang, so we're going to keep the V8 in. Obviously, real drives, you don't want to mess around with the drivetrain swap. Now, aspiration, always go with twin turbo. If you have the option of anything, twin turbo is always the quickest in this game, I'm pretty sure. If there isn't a twin turbo, obviously go with supercharger, but if there is twin turbo, always go with it. And if there's no twin turbo and a single turbo and a supercharger, the single turbo is usually quicker as well, so go with the turbos pretty much all the time, unless you don't have the option. Now you've done that, I like to go over to the engine upgrades. Now what you're going to want to do is just equip all the engine upgrades, except for just go over to the oil/cooling. As I said in the all drive video, it's the same with this. Sometimes you want to equip this, sometimes you don't. You want to check really how much weight it's adding on compared to how much power it's adding on. Because as you can see, this final race cooling is adding 7 horsepower. I think it's adding, what is that, 18 kilograms? So you don't really want to add more weight than horsepower. That's not too bad. There are some cars that add like 30 kilograms for 7 horsepower. So it depends really. I'm just going to equip it this time, but you don't usually, so I'm just going to equip all those parts now. Now, just quickly before we leave the engine tuning section, about the flywheel. In previous games you didn't want to equip the flywheel because there weren't any drag tyres and it like spooled the engine up a bit slower, so it didn't spin as much. In this game I've found that if you don't equip it, the car ends up spinning more. I am tuning this for the event. It will work in free roam, but it won't be as good as someone's tune who's tuned it uniquely for free roam, but it will work just as well really. So I do equip the flywheel now. I didn't used to in old games, but I do now, so just do that. I've found that it is the quickest from the cars I've tried. It might not be in some cars, but for the ones I've tried it is. Now moving on to the platform and handling, you want to always equip the lightest, so race brakes, rally suspension. This is an important one. Most people who don't do drag racing don't know rally suspension is the quickest because you can soften it the most, so make sure you equip rally suspension. Then make sure you've got your anti-roll bars set to the race ones, or whichever ones they allow you. Previous games you would want the roll cage because of the less grip, because there weren't any drag tyres. This game I found you don't need the roll cage. This car is reasonably heavy at 1.6 tons, so I don't think you need it. There might be some cars, if they weigh like less than a ton, then equip it. Then weight reduction, put it all the way. There, it still keeps it over a ton, so I wouldn't put a roll cage in. Then obviously race clutch, race gearbox, race driveline, and make sure you have the diff on. The diff isn't as important in the real drive tune as an all drive tune, but you still want to equip it. Then moving on to your tyres, tyre compound, obviously drag tyre compound. Front tyres, don't equip any front tyres. If you equip wider ones, it's pointless. It's just going to add more rolling resistance on the road, and you don't want that. You want it as, I don't know what you call it, you just don't want any excess resistance. Rear tyres, obviously widest, so you've got the most grip for the launch. Then rims, just to equip some light rims. I always tend to use these drag racing style ones, these weld ones, just go with them, but I do like to paint them matte black because they do look a bit dodgy like that. Then front rim size and rear rim size you don't really want to equip. Sometimes, as I said in the all drive video, you want to equip some front rim size if you're doing front wheel drive tuning, just because it adds a bit more weight over the front end. but you don't really need that in this game, so I just not equip them. Then a big mistake people make when they're tuning drag cars is they equip aero. You don't need aero, it's just going to slow you down, and I went over it a bit in the other video, so it doesn't really need much explaining. You don't need any aero on a drag car, you want it to be as smooth through the air as possible. And well, that's the parts you need to equip. Is pretty much the same for every single car in this game if you're doing a real drive and an all drive tune pretty much. So now I've done that, I'm going to go over to my base tuning setup. Right, now we're going to go through the base setup I like to equip to real drive cars in this game. So we're going to get right into it. Rear tyre pressures you want to put to the lowest, so you've got the biggest contact patch and the most grip. Front tyres, I like to put them all the way up to 55. Because that makes sense to me. The higher the pressure, the smaller the contact patch with the road and the less resistance. Some people say the game doesn't work like that, but I'm pretty sure it does. I don't see why they code it any differently. That's what I like to go with. There may be some other explanation to why the game might not like that, but it should work. So they're the tyre pressures you want to go with. Gearing, I just tend to put the final drive all the way down. You don't need to do this, but I just find it easier working with all the gears. It doesn't really make any sense, to be honest. I just do it out of preference. You don't need to do that, but you can if you want. Alignment, front alignment, go all the way negative, because as I say, that reduces the tyre contact patch with the road at the front, so it'll be less resistance. Rear camber, no toe, and caster angle 6.5. I don't usually mess around with that. 6.5 tends to be a good value. Then anti-roll bars, you want to put, I go all the way soft at the rear and then all the way stiff at the front. It's going to be pretty similar with most, in fact no. Then springs, go all the way soft at the front, and rear I go all the way stiff. Now this doesn't actually end up being the quickest most of the time, but you're better off starting at one end, like maximum stiffness, than working your way down. Rather than starting in the middle of stiffness, working your way down, finding that didn't work, then having to go back to where you were and working your way up. It's a lot easier if you just work your way down until you hit the right point. Then ride height, you always want to keep it the highest. This car is low at the front. Not many cars are actually like that, but you still want to keep them as high as they can be. Damping, front rebound, all the way soft. Rear rebound, all the way stiff. This is similar to the explanation for springs. I just like to start all the way stiff and then work my way down until I find the right point, and then bump all the way stiff at the front and all the way stiff at the rear, all the way stiff. Bump stiffness, you tend to keep this at 10. What it does is it means the car can't, when you launch, it's going to like roll backwards, but then it will want to naturally roll back to level. If you've got the bump stiffness, it will slow that down, and when it rolls back forwards, it's going to take weight and grip off the rear tyres, which you don't want. So you want it to be on those rear tyres for as long as possible. Yeah, moving on to aero, obviously you shouldn't have equipped any, so if you have got aero tuning available, take the wing off and the splitter. Brakes don't really matter, I like to set them to 45 and 115. Then diff doesn't really matter too much, I just go 100 and 0. So that's the base tuning setup I like to go with for real drive. I'll just quickly go over them again. So there's your tyres, your gearing, alignment, anti-roll bars, springs, damping, aero, brake, and differential. So that's that, and now we're going to move on to fine tuning. Moving on to fine tuning, I'm going to try and make this as in-depth yet quick as possible because my voice is starting to go a bit and I won't be able to say anything if it does. So we're going to start off with tyres, just keep them the same as the base setup pretty much. That is bang on, I keep that for all my real drive tunes. Gearing, what you're going to want to do on gearing is move your first gear more and more to the right, so increasing the value, making the gear shorter and shorter until you get to the point where the car doesn't spin first gear, but gets away with the shortest gear. So you want to make it as short as possible without it spinning. So I'm going to demonstrate what it is like stock. This is pretty much stock, I moved it a bit. So this is what it's going to look like currently without any gear adjustment. It really bogs and it's not quick at all. Now I'm going to move that forward. I'm going to cut. I kind of know where to put it anyway. So you want to just keep moving this that way, shortening the gear until it's as quick as you can. get it without the car spinning. I think 4.15 is about, I'll go 4.14 is about the correct place. So I'm going to demonstrate now. I found this out before, so I know where to put it. You wouldn't, so you just keep moving along until you got it. There we go, it spun a bit, you're going to get it. There is still some randomness in this game launching even though you're full throttle. It is manual clutch, by the way, always manual clutch with rear drive pretty much. There we go, see, it didn't spin at all, got away well. Now we're going to go on to the other gears. They're pretty simple, you just want to tune it. So 4th gear, we're going to go for 4 gears because that's pretty much what you want for the quarter mile. Set the 4th gear so the car is maxed out in 4th gear, so it reaches its top speed at the very top end of 4th gear. I believe it's about 1.65 maybe. I did this beforehand. You just remember, just keep moving it to the right, shortening the gear, or in some cases you need to slow it down. Just make it so 4th gear tops out at the top speed when you cross the line. Then the other gears, you want to make it so it's a smooth curve between all the gears. You can see here, like that one's sticking out the most. This is kind of a dumb explanation. There's a smooth curve between all the gears, and you can kind of see on the graph in the bottom right, the lines are progressively getting shorter and they're on more of an angle. You want it like that. If you don't, you'll end up, some people tune their cars completely wrong where they have second gears really short, so you're only in it for like half a second, and then 3rd gear is really long. That's not what you want because you're not in the power band at all. So just get it roughly right. I think that is kind of a smooth curve. We'll demonstrate now. You'll see the improvement. I'll try and explain while we're going. Spun a bit there, but see, 2nd gear changes to 5.5, 5,800 RPM and about 6,500 RPM, and it just, I think we need to speed that up just a bit. But you see what I mean there, each gear changes to a higher RPM. You don't want the higher gears changing to a lower RPM than the previous one. So I'll just mess around with that a bit until I get it kind of right. Right, I was happy with that. I am on 60 FPS mode at the moment, so I will get dodgy times. I usually don't have it on 60 FPS mode, but I thought I did. I think I was trying the F1 or something. But you'll see. I think that was pretty much a 8.574, I think, if you're not on 60 FPS mode. Now you saw there it works a lot better and that time was a lot faster. Now we've done gearing. That is the principle of gearing. Sometimes you want a 3-gear tune, sometimes you want a 5. It's the same principle. Smooth curve between all the gears. Alignment, for some reason it's not set right. It was, for the base setup, it was 5 negative. Don't need to change any of that, that's all fine. Anti-roll bars, you can keep them the same. Now springs and damping you kind of adjust at the same time. So you don't want to change 2 things at once. Change 1 thing at a time. If you change 2 things at once or multiple things at once, you're not going to know which thing has actually made the difference. So what you're going to want to do for springs is try it at the stiffest and then just move it down, let's say like 10ish, and then try that. Is it any better? If it is, try again, moving it down. Keep moving it down and down and down until you get it to be as fast as it can be. I'm just going to show the difference here. You've already seen it at that. I'm going to try it at 120. And the car should... It's not a major difference. The rear-wheel drive cars in this game tend to like the back end a bit stiffer compared to the all-wheel drive tunes. Spun there. There we go, as you can see that time was way quicker than the other ones. I think it's partly down to my gear changing was a lot better, but that launch was a lot better still. So we're going to stick with that. I think I brought it down to about 110. Obviously I could do it for a bit longer and try and get it better than it is, but because I'm just trying to demonstrate the basic principle for this video, that's what I'll go with. And something you can do, if you find the car's wheeling a bit too much at the start, you can stiffen the front a bit, maybe to about 35. It's going to be hard to demonstrate because the car does spin quite a lot of the time. If you up the front stiffness a bit, it will actually keep the front end of the car down more, so it won't wheelie as much. I don't know if you'll be able to see the difference here really. You could kind of see it there, but the basic principle is you can see how the car's lifting up now when I accelerate. The car won't lift up as much the more you stiffen the front, so you can just mess around with that if you find you're losing. Though you can never really go wrong with wheeling with a rear-wheel drive car unless it's completely on the back end. But that's kind of more for all-wheel drive, you don't want the front to lift up. So we'll stick with that. Moving on to damping, it's more of the same principle as springs. You just want to lower, except there is something different. You want to always do rear bump and rear rebound at the same time is what I tend to do, because they kind of work together, really, kind of. So just lower it, for instance, one at a time like that, until you get to a point where the car's launching at its best point. If the launch is as smooth with as less spin as possible, you may find sometimes that all the way stiff is actually the best, but you've just got to try like one increments of one at a time to see if it makes any difference. It is a bit difficult to tell sometimes when you've got a tune that is spinning half the time, because you might get false like readings, because you'll change something, the car will spin, you think you've made it worse, but it was actually just a one-off launch where it spun. So just make sure, I'm not doing it much here in this video, but make sure you give a few attempts. That did seem relatively good. I know that for the Mustang GT500 you want it softer at the rear. I think it's about 6. So you can try that if you want. Just keep moving it down by 1 is the basic principle and see if it's quicker. And if you get it to a point where it's not spinning, I tried it earlier and 8 seemed to work, then you can go back to your gearing and bump it up a couple of times, and then just keep adjusting the suspension and going back to the gearing and try and get it to the point where the first gear is as short, so the value is as big as possible without spinning. So I don't know if it will be able to launch at 416, but we'll give it a go. That seemed a lot better. I don't know if it spun at the top end of first gear though. We got another 525, but that was better than the other 525, I think. You could see though on the launch visibly the car did pick up quicker, but it did spin a bit in the top end of first gear. So what I did there is, yeah, it's launching a lot more consistently now. So what I did there was I just softened the rear damping and then increased the first gear, so shortened it, and it ended up making it quicker. You've just got to keep doing these, like adjust the suspension and then adjust the gearing and just try and get it as short as possible without spinning. It's pretty much the basic principle. There isn't really much left to cover. Aero you shouldn't have to change. Brake you can just leave the same. If you want to change it, in this game it is backwards, so you'd think because that's towards the rear in the picture that it's more biased towards the rear. It's actually more biased towards the front. So the more you put it that way, the more biased to the front. More to the left, the more biased to the rear, and that's just your pressure, which is pretty irrelevant because you can just adjust your dead zones on your controller and stuff until you get it into a place you like. Diff, you don't need to change on rear-wheel drive because it is just locked like that. So that's it really. We'll just quickly cover the basics again. Gearing, smooth curve, get your first gear as short as possible without spinning. Springs, put them at stiffest and keep moving them more and more softer until you get to a point where it works the best, or stiff might be the best overall. Same with damping, but adjust your rear rebound and your rear bump at the same time. Don't bother touching your front bump. 10 tends to work for all my tunes. I don't leave it or don't change it from that. So that's that really. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.